Welcome everyone. My name is Esteban Servat and I'm an Argentinian scientist. I used to live in the US for a long time, and then I came back to my home country to build an eco-village. Just to give a brief introduction about myself. And I moved to the area of Mendoza province to start building this project for a community. And then fracking came to our region and started contaminating the water tables. We were unlucky enough to be sitting on what is the second largest shale gas basin in the world and the fourth largest basin for shale oil in the world, known as Vaca Muerta. And so they were advancing with fracking, and I found out there was a secret environmental impact study that was revealing contamination of the water tables by the first wells of fracking. And we managed to get a copy of this report that the government was hiding in order to move ahead with the drilling, and they were planning to replace the results. So we created an environmental version of WikiLeaks in a very South American fashion, with very low tech, but with the urgent need to publish this secret report, and we called it EcoLeaks. And this led to a lot of mobilization, really a revolution, tens of thousands of people in the streets demanding the end of fracking. And this was in 2018. And then it also turned me into the biggest target for government persecution, a lot of criminal cases fabricated against me, a lot of media operations that turned me into the person with the highest number of criminal cases of anyone in Argentina for fighting fracking, and death threats against me, and later on increasingly against the rest of my family. And so in early 2019, my girlfriend and I came to Germany, where we're living now. And now from Europe, we are continuing this fight to try to put an end to this, because Europe is playing a big role, as I'm about to show you. So basically what I will tell you about is how they are telling us that we're going to transition away from coal into something they say is cleaner, and it's a clean transition fuel, which is gas. But the reality is that this is actually much worse than coal in terms of its emissions, especially when it comes from fracking, which has been shown to be a leading cause of accelerating climate change. I will explain how this is a colonial climate time bomb, because just the place where I come from, this basin alone will consume 15% of the entire global carbon budget. And also how this presents us with an opportunity for a paradigm shift to look a little more at the global south and what's going on there being done by companies of the global north, and is one of the major reasons for the pollution and the climate crisis that we're facing. So first, this fraud that we are going to transition away from coal, but how on earth are we going to do that with something that is worse than coal? Well, this gas that I will tell you about comes to Europe in the form of LNG, which stands for liquefied natural gas. It's extracted, and then it needs to be condensed and brought down to minus 160 Celsius degrees, compressed about 600 times so it can be liquefied and loaded on these huge transatlantic ships that are also very contaminating, with use very heavy fuels. And the transport alone from the Americas to Europe adds an additional 20% carbon footprint on this gas, which is already having the worst carbon footprint of all fossil fuels. So some media and science in recent years have shown how this shale gas is even worse than coal for the climate. And I'm going to warn you, I'm going to go over these slides with the intent of giving you a big picture, painting the big picture, so that you can always go into further details. I'm not going to stop too much time into every technical aspect of each slide, but after the presentation, I will send you the PDF with all the external links so that you can go into more detail for anything that you want to find out. Otherwise, it would take way longer to make the presentation, but also I can answer any questions at the end. So as I just told you, shale gas is the worst of all. It has the biggest carbon footprint. Here's the comparison to conventional gas, coal, and oil. And the methane emissions are so huge that when you turn them into carbon units, is actually a lot worse than anything else we have. This is on a 20-year period. The industry and governments and media are usually comparing this on a 100-year period when methane is not as bad because it decays faster. But during the first 20 years in the atmosphere, the global warming potential is up to 87 times worse than CO2. So this is a graph from another scientific paper that showed the contribution of methane to the atmosphere from the different fossil fuels in recent years in teragrams per year, and by far shale gas has been the biggest contributor, as I just said, and as I just showed you, is 87 times worse than CO2. At the same time, Europe is being literally flooded with this. LNG terminals for import of this gas are being built or planned or expanded across the continent with public money. This is mostly being done with taxpayer funds, with billions of euros, to lock Europe into dependency of this fossil fuel for decades to come, while it's being presented to the European public as a clean form of energy and a transition fuel, which couldn't be farther from the truth. The shale revolution, so-called, the fracking revolution, because it's fracking since it was created, has been revolutionizing the energy supply of the world. It's allowed the US to become an energy superpower. They went from being a net importer of energy to becoming the world's largest exporter of gas and oil. And because of this, they are projected to provide more than half of the world gas by 2035. So this is a major game changer for the industry and for the world, the energy world, taking us farther away from renewables and farther away from any hope of achieving the targets of the Paris Agreement or the 1.5 Celsius degrees. And no one is talking about it, except, of course, us, the grassroots movements and some organizations. But the big media, the big establishment is saying nothing about this major problem. And it's until now, it's quite absent from the debate here in Europe as well. But Europe, as I will show you, is playing a major role in this industry. So this is from the US Energy Agency, which just shows how, thanks to fracking, the US has already surpassed Russia and Saudi Arabia in terms of energy production. This is from the European Commission report from last year, from this year actually, where they made this appeal of how LNG frack gas from the US, there is so much future for this in Europe. And they're literally showing how after the meeting of Juncker and Trump in 2018, the LNG imports from the US, and keep in mind, this is just the beginning, okay? The US, the fracking boom in the US is only a decade old, and they're just in recent years beginning to have enough to export, but this has been growing exponentially, as have been the imports. And as you can see, they jumped a lot. Already 36% of all US frack gas is coming to the European Union, and the projections are to further expand this, building new LNG terminals everywhere with public funds. The LNG energy exports increased by 760% since the meeting of Trump and Juncker, and they'll continue to do so. This is just a visual of the vessels. And how for 2020, this was taken on January 8th. So it was just the beginning, but it was projected to continue exponentially growing. And unless we do something about it, we're gonna get locked into this for decades to come and drive all of the climate and the world down with us. So